power plants to be able to function effectively. So that's the conversation and what it means. My apologies, I didn't deal with this issue of economic sabotage and the protest, and I do apologize because it was raised. Labor laws around foreign employment, foreign nationals employed in the country. They do feel that we have left it open, even where you have, for example, areas where there is no scarce skill or is not listed as a scarce skill. We do have foreign nationals playing in that role, and therefore raising it as a concern that you are continuing to see majority of South Africans being unemployed or displaced, and therefore the need for us to ensure that we enforce the laws that we have in terms of ensuring that, because labor laws are very clear in terms of employment and the areas where you could be able to bring foreign nationals in terms of critical skills to be employed, that we're currently seeing not that enforced, and there was a call for that. The issue around economic sabotage, yes, it was discussed, but not specifically in terms of the July unrest. It was discussed around the issue of, for example, infrastructure specifically, to say we're seeing the damage of infrastructure, it is impacting on our economy. It wasn't even labeled as economic sabotage, I must say. It was labeled about government having to take more efforts in terms of ensuring that we protect the economy and we protect the infrastructure that we have to be able to survive and make sure that it can be able to deal with what we are seeing or what we want to see in terms of economic growth. So acknowledgement that some of the areas that we should have been able to ensure that we are protecting, we are. To a certain extent, some of the issues raised even around the construction areas, where you'd call them the issue around construction mafias, but we understand that that will be dealt with more in the Security Commission, Safety and Security Commission, but it was flagged as part of having to deal with those for economic growth. The issue of what does it mean on strengthening, not weakened ESCOM. Remember, even when the president made the pronouncement, it was on the basis that we will work in terms of ensuring that we maintain our plans. ESCOM has a role to play in the economy, therefore it's important for us to be able to do that while we are bringing in private generation into the sector. So yes, the issue of energy private generation came up. There were delegates that felt that it will be a disaster, we shouldn't be going this way, but our view is that it has to be balanced, and it was responded to within that, that you would have private generation that continues in terms of the IPP, therefore a balance with the strengthening of ESCOM to continue to play that role. It's important, and that's how it was responded to as well. What was this one on the funding of state-owned entities? Look, the Commission didn't deal with specifically, as I said, it was made as an example that there is a need for us to look at state-owned entities that has a critical role. For example, even your ESCOM, that we need to deal with ESCOM debt so that ESCOM does not face challenges in order to fulfill its mandate. Similarly, with issue that you would have to fund those that do steam as strategic, but it's not directly to say fund them from this. So our view has been, when we proposed to say we would want to see in terms of state-owned entities that do not have a strategic role to play and contribute to the developmental mandate, being able to be disposed of or whatever that we call rationalized, because we have duplications. And this linked to the question whether we've done work. Yes, they've been done work. For example, where we identify some of the state-owned entities that have a duplication to be synchronized and the work continues. You find some others as well already repositioned in the state in various portfolios. And I always argue that we must remember the state-owned entities in the country are not only in DPE. So you'd find, for example, in science and innovation and higher education, they would have looked at the state-owned entities there. How do they rationalize them? How do they make sure? In ICT digital, it's called communication and digital technologies, they would have looked at the state-owned entities there, reposition them. For example, you previously had USASA. You previously had BBI. So there is process in terms of reconfiguration of those state-owned entities. So it's continuous work across portfolios. We are looking as well in the tourism space. tourism space, there was an issue around brand SA together with SAT. For example, how do we differentiate their mandate, because they seem to be marketing organizations. So those are the discussions that have been, and the work that has been done. So quite a number of research work has been done, and we're giving progress report to say, this is where we are finding duplicates, this is where we are suggesting rationalization measures and all those things. But as you know, it's a long process. It's not something that happens overnight. The issue of expropriation without compensation. Yes, it was discussed. As I say, delegates still felt that we shouldn't dump this because they believe that is important, the amendment of Section 25. We have reported, for example, that you are able to expropriate currently if it's for public good. For example, Minister of Human Settlements can expropriate without compensation to deal with issues of human settlement, to be able to place people. So that has been reported into the Commission. The expropriation bill that is before Parliament is another avenue to assist us in fast tracking while we're dealing with it. So that's where we are. We'll continue to engage with the delegates to be able to find a unifying voice as we go towards the national conference, to be able to say this is what we'll be able to achieve. The issue of the petroleum space, the energy sector, it's another energy area in terms of refineries. Yes, it was raised, concerns around the closure of the refineries in KZN, but also that there's been work that continues and has not been concluded around the possibility of a local company or local refinery that was meant to be in Gura, and the request was that can we fast track this and conclude it as part of ensuring that there's energy security. I think I've responded to all this time. Did I forget anything? Maybe just emphasize that.
Yeah, just to elaborate slightly on the question that was asked of me, with regard to Eskom, as the chairperson has said, the basic logic of the President's intervention to end load shedding as quickly as possible is a two-pillar logic. The first pillar is to try and cut the red tape to ensure that there is a floodgate opening of investment in new electricity capacity, whether it's renewables or other forms. And the second part is, through doing the first part, Eskom will be strengthened in the following way, in the sense that through doing the first part, if there is more electricity on the national grid, Eskom will have more time and space in which to do the maintenance that it cannot do very easily during load shedding. So it'll have the space to do the maintenance it needs to do. It will strengthen Eskom in that manner. Secondly, Eskom will be required to burn over time less diesel. We're burning many, many millions of liters of diesel, which is putting financial strain onto Eskom. So those would be two particular ways in which the plan would say we're going to strengthen Eskom. In the longer term, obviously, Eskom will be a publicly owned entity. The grid company in particular will have a strategic role to play. And the generation side, as the chairperson said, will have a mix of public and private inputs, massively transitioned. With regard to the question on the pace and scale, as the chairperson says, the reason it is articulated in that manner is because it is important for South Africans, and ANC members are developing an appreciation that we need to pursue that agreement with the international partners as part of our own sovereign interest. So we are doing this in our own sovereign interest. Nothing is being imposed on South Africa with regard to the energy transition. We are saying that we are going to undertake this transition, and it aligns with the interests of the world to reduce the carbon and to reduce climate change. So it's within our own sovereign interest to pursue this, and it will be done in that manner where we, through the negotiations that are underway between South Africa and those parties, will be defined in a way that will take into account our needs for electricity and our needs for a just transition for the workers and for the areas like in Mpumalanga. And the last thing is on the emergency and the crisis, as the Comrade Chairperson has said, there was a somber mood in the Commission, and it was due to the fact that we've never had unemployment, poverty, inequality increasing as it is since we had a democracy in 1994. And it requires urgent interventions. And as the chairperson says, we felt the spirit of the way that the country came together to deal with the vaccine crisis, to deal with the COVID crisis, is the kind of spirit. So the details will have to follow from that spirit, and I hear you were looking for details, but it's about coming together to deal with this economic crisis. Thank you.
I think that's it.
Okay. No. Thank you very much, Mmamoloko and Comrade Krima. Just to clarify, journalist Comrade Krima is a UDF veteran. He has been with ETC, as he says, for the past 30 years. So he's a proper ETC encyclopedia of the ANC. Thank you very much. Yes. We are now going to do peace and stability. Comrade Mahlobo is here, issues of immigration. So we're moving straight into peace and stability. Kubay.
Yes. Yo. Yeah, it's cool. And then who else is there? Okay. And then after energy, what the rate? Okay. I'm not proud of you. Okay, then education. I get teaching. So we'll take. You can take. Social can take. I can young thing. Better of idea. Take one rate. Okay. But check. Okay. Later. Hands with. Yeah. But it's too much.
Yeah. One day, you can come and sit. We are going straight into peace and stability. So those that may want to talk to Mmamoloko afterwards are welcome to file their requests, and we will make them available. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Mahlobo. These are members of the media, Mahlobo. They are part of the 453 journalists who are here.
The ones that we made them to register with.
Yeah. We took care of them throughout. Okay, over to you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Pule, to the members of the media and those who are listening to us. On behalf of the Commission on Peace and Stability, we have concluded our work. We should be presenting to the plenary of the ANC our policy recommendations. And it was a very vibrant commission in terms of the engagement of issues. Well, the commission had an opportunity, firstly, to do a reflection of the decisions that we have made in the 54th National Conference as part of the resolutions, were to recap of the decisions that we have made and the progress that we have made so far. We also had an opportunity to reaffirm those decisions that we have made, especially in a number of areas where the work is ongoing and decisions have not been made. And the Commission also interacted with the policy discussion document. The policy discussion document, in the main, it gives an assessment of the security situation as it applies in our own context. South Africa is part of the United Nations. We had an opportunity to look at the global situation. The assessment of the global situation has been reconfirmed by the Commission, that the geopolitical tensions that we face is pushing the world to an edge. and humanity and our own existence as humanity is under threat. We have said that these geopolitical tensions are always compounded by the already existing situation around the impact of COVID-19. COVID-19, it was a very difficult situation where lives were lost and governments had to respond around how to save lives, but at the very same time, protecting livelihoods. The supply chains were disrupted and a number of economies were affected, including our own. Our own economy was affected even before COVID-19, and immediately we have noted that our government, like other governments in the world, has responded to the economic downturn. We did produce our own economic reconstruction recovery plan, a very bold plan that was presented by His Excellency Comrade Ramaphosa in the joint houses in terms of the sitting. And our commission feels strongly that despite this geopolitical tension right now, we must proceed and be steadfast in the implementation of that plan. On the issues that are affecting Russia and the Ukraine in terms of the conflict, our observation is the behavior and the interests of the United States in terms of its own policy position, that they will not want to have any emergence of a new rival. But at the very same time, we know that the behavior of NATO to expand beyond the old agreements that were signed in the Warsaw Pact, these are some of the challenges that we face. We know that the Russian Federation equally had put some of the demands on the table, very worried in terms of dealing with those particular issues. As a commission, our stance as South Africa remains that we believe that any conflict must be resolved through negotiations, not war. And we are very hopeful that this conflict, it must come to an end at a particular point, because it's no longer affecting the people of Russia and Ukraine, but even us in the African continent, we are affected on the basis of food insecurity. The cost of living is very high, inflation, the debts, all these other issues that are coming in, including the issues around the issues of fuel. And remember, we are a nation that is dependent on others when it comes to issues of fuel. We are calling for the strengthening of multilateral institutions. We condemn the issues of unilateralism in dealing with those particular issues. And we are also keeping an eye on the situation that is happening in the East. When you look at Asia, and it might be a problem because those economic wars had already started, and they had already started to cause some problems around trade relations and the emergence of protectionism. We have reaffirmed our assessment of the African continent, that the role that South Africa must play and continue to play in terms of international relations, but also in terms of security. As we know now, His Excellency Comrade President is a chairperson of SADC, organ troika, in terms of matters of security. Our involvement in the DRC, our involvement in Mozambique as part of the SADC standby force and everywhere. These are some of the issues that we will say South Africa will continue to play an important role in ensuring that there is peace in our continent, and we silence the guns, even if we have missed some of the details. We have also noted the issues around the rise of terrorism, and the issues of terrorism that has actually caused a lot of misplacement and displacement of our communities. We have looked at that, and we are actually calling for stability in the continent. And the non-state actors and the people that are foreign people that are interfering in our own affairs. Therefore, the issues of strengthening of the African Union peace and security architecture is an important element we are looking at. In our own shores, Comrade Bule, we are saying that as South Africa we remain relatively stable. The issues of terrorism is an issue of concern. We are not worried about any terror attack, but we are saying that South Africa can't be used as a safe haven in terms of planning, recruitment, and financing of terror organizations. We then look at the key issues like migration. Migration is one of the issues that many governments around the world, they've been taken out of power if it is not handled very well. In our own case, we have noted progress made by the President enacted the Border Management Authority into Act. The institution has been created right now and is being capacitated. The top leadership of the Border Management Authority is in place. We know that now the border guards have been brought in, and it's a matter that we think that they need more resources so that we can be able to ensure the integrity of the management of our borders. Our borders indeed, they remain porous. We also of the view that the issues around infrastructure, around our borders in terms of the borderline, whether the land, whether the one that we are dealing with in terms of the sea, must be sorted out. We are also saying that the issues of the air borders and in terms of the airspace, it has to be secured, especially those illegal landing strips that we are facing as a country. But at the very same time, we are worried around the issues of the legislation and the clear policy position of the ANC around the issues of the management of migration. Our view is that our ascension to the Convention of 1951 around the issues of refugees and so forth, South Africa, we are recommending now that learning from the experiences of other countries, we think it's time that the conference in December must consider that South Africa must withdraw from this instrument and deposit a new instrument where South Africa will be able to put reservation. Even countries that are advanced and are well developed, to a certain degree, they are able, on the basis of national security and national interest, to put those particular conditions. We are not totally withdrawing to those conventions, but we want to be able to manage our own issues and the pressures we face. Some of the technical issues around the reception centers, there is a strong view that we have normally integrated people who are foreigners in our own land coming for refugees and asylum seekers, and there is a strong view that is coming up that it must be closer to the borders in terms of reception centers, so they are treated like other conventions in the UN around these particular issues. That is a very strong recommendation. Our laws around the issues of permits, the visas and so forth, we are going to overhaul the legislation, streamline it, so that there is a clear clarity around those particular issues, what we need to do, and the necessary legislation will be done, and the department responsible of Home Affairs will be properly capacitated in terms of technological capability, but at the very same time, the resources to be able to discharge this function, working with the other agencies. But we are also calling that there are those who are actually using the matter of how we manage migration to fan xenophobia, to stop doing it. Because criminality must be treated as criminality, irrespective who's committing it. Everybody within our borders must respect our laws. The emergence of these organizations becoming xenophobes is one of the issues that the ANC is making a call to our people to say, we need to live in harmony, but even those who are here, they must respect our laws. And our laws must be actually bite, we must act without any fear or favor or prejudice. The other matters we have looked at are the issues around fighting corruption. The fight against corruption is at the foremost by the organization. In the main, we are saying that our fight against corruption must not have eyes. It must be consistent. We must be able to act without any fear or favor or prejudice. Our decision is that all the investigations that are currently have happened and the reports that are there, whether it's the report on the state capture, on the inquiry on the state capture, and its recommendation that are related to peace and stability. They will have to be implemented. They are being supported. But at the very same time, we are also supporting the decision by the ANC NEC that those that are implicated, irrespective of their choices they are making legally, they must be able to approach the Integrity Commission, and the law enforcement agencies must be able to act without any fear or favor. We are also including the reports, whether it's SIU reports, whether it's HAG report, whether it's Section 106 investigation reports. They must be implemented because corruption is one issue that has actually caused a lot of damage to the ANC when it comes to the trust deficit. We are also saying that the ANC on fighting corruption must also attend to the matters of capacity. We are recommending that a multidisciplinary agency that is well-resourced, well-capacitated, that is vibrant, must be re-established, but that must also have an operational independence. As it was decided by the Constitutional Court, we have to be in a position to actually do that particular agency to deal with these highly level sophisticated matters around corruption, including issues of illicit economy. And the necessary legislation will have to be undertaken if the ANC in December agrees in terms of doing that. It will also be building on the current intervention by President on the question of the Fusion Center, where all agencies, intelligence, the police, financial intelligence, SARS, customs, and everybody is under one roof. But internally in the organization, we are learning from our friends, the Chinese Communist Party, that whilst the ANC must strengthen its Integrity Commission and resource it, but the ANC should consider a possibility of creating its own anti-corruption agency, a commission in the ANC, in the form of the Communist Party, that will be delegated to look at these particular issues. But the whole recommendation around vetting, around all these other issues, they remain in place. Around the issues of the capacity of the state, we have looked at the security cluster over time, despite the growth in population and despite the growth of our economy in terms of size, the investment in security has been declining. And therefore, it has posed a serious risk about the ability of the security service to respond. The number of police in terms of the ratio of the people that are being served, the numbers, if you compare between 2010 and now, we have actually gone down, and our ability to cover the space is one of the issues. We have also looked at the issues of the capacity of our defense force. We also have looked at the issues of the capacity of the technological ability to do some of these issues. We are then saying that that investment should be made in terms of that. But at the very same time, the capacity issues must also involve the involvement of communities, the structures of community that must deal with the issues of fighting crime, like your CPF, like your ward committees, your street committees, all these structures of the that we say is organs of people's power, they must be in place. And at this stage, we want to commend the police working with the people of the West Rand of the heinous incident that happened, where young women were brutally assaulted, they were raped, they were traumatized by people that are highly armed and causing people to not to feel safe in their own neighborhood, in their own homes. And the incidents that have already happened, whether they are shootings that have happened in places of recreation. And these are the issues to say that the police, in terms of intelligence, they must be able to up the game, do an analysis around these role players and how sophisticated these gangs and these networks are working. But then communities have a responsibility to ensure that we don't create safe havens where these people who are committing these crimes, some of them, they are being known. But at the very same time, we have to ensure the protection of communities, especially the whistleblowers. The whistleblowers, in terms of the Act, it must be reviewed in such a way that the protection must be given. The other issues around legislation that we thought in terms of our capability is around issues of the prevention of organized criminal activities, POC. It needs to be reviewed so that the SIU must still also have some capability around investigating powers so that we can be able to deal with these issues, not only around issues of asset forfeiture and so forth, so that at least when it comes to prosecution, we are able to prosecute well. But around transnational organized criminality and people flying away or leaving South Africa, we are looking at the issues of extradition treaties and the mutual legal assistance as an important issue, so that the people who leave our shores, we should have that particular relationship that we deal with. There are a number of cases that are already that we think that the law enforcement agencies must look at. We also look at the issues of cybersecurity, especially the content issues, the capability of our country to manage the cyberspace, and how necessary legislation must be dealt with. But at the very same time, we are saying that the cyberspace is a new normal, because it's a breathtaking advances in terms of science, in terms of technology, for medicine, for education and others, but including the issues of the digital gap that still exists. But this space, it can be exploited. A number of organizations, including our own state and even the private sector, they have been acted in the cyberspace, and the cyber wars must be looked at, including the securing of the airspace. We have also looked at the question of economic sabotage and the attack on strategic economic infrastructure and installation. And in the main, this matter is more prevalent when you look at the formal mining belt, whether it's from Gauteng going down to Free State, certain elements in Limpopo, Northwest, KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga. It's a matter of illegal mining must be dealt very decisively. But at the very same time, we are calling on the state to ensure that those economic issues around small-scale miners, they are being attended to. But then these issues around the scrap metals and the issues on copper, we are raising them. The attack on electrical infrastructure, whether it is water infrastructure, our road network, that these decisive actions needs to be dealt with, and including the schedule of offenses that must be taken to the next level. On defense, we have said that the role of the defense force, the defense review and its recommendation must be implemented. It must be resourced. We need to know that the defense is the most strategic component, not only for the defense for our country, but it must be at the cutting edge, like other defense industries. The question of Denel, the question of Armsco, around R&D is going to be an important matter that we are raising. But at the very same time, we are also saying that we want our arms industry to be the supplier of choice for the continent. Therefore, the development of this so that we can be able to have an economic output will be very important. We have also raised the role of peace and stability, especially on the question of fighting crime, gender-based violence, and femicide, and how we are calling the ANC structures that we need to have programs and campaigns on the ground to deal with these issues. We are also raising in our report the issues of the re-establishment of the structures that were there to be able to support communities, including the support of CPF, in special around resources and around the issues of stipend. They call it stipend because other committees are being funded. As we conclude, Comrade Bule, because we are covering a range of other issues, we wanted to say the unity of the ANC and the renewal of the ANC is an important matter. Because if the organization continued with the high levels of divisions, the high levels of factionalism, it has an impact on the stability of our nation and our ability to lead society and be able to respond on these issues, especially on issues around delivery. Because most of the challenges we face is our ability to deliver services, whether it's water, whether it's electricity, whether it's housing, but also our ability to deal decisively with some of those elements in the main that I've said they are dealing with corruption. That's the summary of the issues, but the entire recommendation in our paper, they are highly supported, there are issues of emphasis, and there are certain issues that are not medium-term and long-term, but they are immediate issues that even between now and the national conference must be implemented. Thank you very much, Comrade Bull.
No, thanks, Comrade Mahlobo, for that comprehensive brief to members of the media. Comrades, I noticed that Comrade Sisulu is here to come and present on social transformation. I'm going to suggest as follows, that to save time, we open for one round of questions for peace and stability and then move straight to social transformation. Is that fine? Okay. Can I now open the floor for questions? Okay, Aloy, can we start at the back and move to the front? Start with Karen. There.
Thank you. Good evening, Minister. It's Karine du Plessis, freelance journalist. I have two questions. The one question, sorry, I just wrote it down. The one question is about the Ukraine-Russia conflict. How has the ANC, has the ANC assessed the government's efforts to encourage and establish negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, as we have been saying is our belief? Has there been any successes towards getting the two countries closer together to talk? And my other question is about the ANC's funding crisis. I interviewed the KwaZulu-Natal Secretary, Bheki Mtholo, and he said the funding crisis is in part due to spies infiltrating the organization and who don't want to see the ANC succeed as a liberation movement. Does this agree with the ANC's assessment of the current funding crisis of the ANC? Thank you.
Good evening.
It looks like we didn't hear your second question. You want to just repeat?
Okay, yeah. My second question, I spoke to the KwaZulu-Natal secretary, the newly elected secretary, about the ANC's funding crisis, and he said that there are some forces who don't want the ANC to succeed as a liberation movement. He called them spies. And he said they're to blame for the funding crisis partly. Also, I don't know, I'm not quite sure what he meant, but maybe the ANC has got more clarity on this. Maybe you've assessed this threat. Thank you.
Okay. Looks like you managed to. Yes. Okay.
Evening, Unomazimankosi from Sowetan. I just wanted to find out, in terms of the peace and stability, if the conference has maybe deliberated on the report that came out on the July unrest, where it found government's response to the riots, it found it wanting and lacking, that it was uncoordinated, and basically the security cluster ignored recommendations or warnings that had been there prior. I just wanted to find out if there were any discussions around that report and sort of what sort of recommendations or assessments have been made in regards to the response from last year.
Thank you so much. It's Governor Mills from ENCA. Did the policy conference at all decide what it believed the cause of the unrest was? Did it deliberate on the effect of the imprisonment of former President Jacob Zuma? What was its analysis on the effect of that imprisonment? And what was the policy conference deliberations on the extent to which members in the ANC themselves pose a risk to peace and stability in South Africa? And what are you going to do about that? And let me leave it there. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. It's Kylie Kumalo here from SABC. I just want to get just a clarity on the granting of Israel observer status within the AU. Did the committee look at that particular issue and just the implications? Because for the longest time, the ANC has always been talking about the Palestinian cause. And what would be your advice to South African government? As we know that this issue was deferred to the next AU summit, what would be your advice to South Africa's policymakers with regards to this issue?
It's Christian Duplessis here from Netwerk 24. My question would be just surrounding the recommendation about the independent law enforcement agency. Did you have something like the Scorpions in mind? And then with the other question that I had is this anti-corruption agency in the ANC that you are proposing. What did you have in mind with that agency? Why is it necessary? Thank you.
Hi, it's Veli Mtiane from the SABC News. While you talk about silencing the guns in Africa as a continent, but the guns in South Africa are ringing louder and louder. There's so much increase of gun violence in the country. And two, there is also easily accessibility of the illegal guns in the country. Were there any discussions to capacitate the SAPS, probably to establish a unit that is going to deal with the prevalence of illegal guns in the country and gun violence?
My name is Pieter de Tooy. I'm from News 24. Was the role of the SSA discussed at all at this committee? We know from the Zondo Commission evidence that was led there, findings by the Zondo Commission, findings by the Mufamadi investigation into SSA about the criminality at SSA, how the SSA was repurposed to serve a certain faction of the ANC. Was that discussed at all as far as securing the country was concerned? Thank you.
Okay. Are we done with all? Or do we still have a hand? Well, this is the only round of questions. Okay, you can go. You can proceed to answer, Mahlobo.
Thank you very much. The question of Russia-Ukraine conflict were very clear. It has been discussed in our commission. And in our commission, there are a number of recommendations that we are making to the plenary. One of the recommendations is that the adversaries that has actually led to the reaction by the Russian Federation themselves, they need to desist. Respect that the issues of expansion to the Russian borders and the issues of the admission of certain states at the center, it causes problems. And we are then saying that the international laws and convention, including the UN, must be the only body that must be respected so that we can convene and deal with these issues. Because we could see there's the biggest temptation of acting unilaterally by other states on various grounds, whether it's national security and national interest. And the militarization of the globe, as the ANC, we are actually promoting the issues of disarmament. There is no need to militarize. And you could see that a number of countries are spending the biggest of their budgets around actually building their military capacity. These are some of the recommendations that we have seen. And you know that the ANC through government and the ANC itself, there's been an interaction with the countries that are in conflict, including our own participation in the multilateral institution about our position around the existing conflict. And the Commission is supporting that. Government is on the right track. Let's continue to do that. Let's also mobilize the progressive forces internationally so that we persuade them about the correctness of our position. We all know that our position from time immemorial, even those who are at war, at a particular point, the generals, they need to sit, they need to talk. At the end of the day, the generals must sign a peace pact. Therefore, our call for peace, our call for negotiation and mediation remains the option that is there. And we think that many states must be able to call for that. But we have also raised the question of the UN Security Council, and an important instrument that it discusses most of the security issues as allowed by the UN, and most of the issues on the agenda, they deal with our own African continent. Our voice on reform will be continuing to be much louder. We will have to ensure that Africa remains united so that we do get our rightful position, that the matters of Africa that are discussed in that body, we are them as permanent members. That remains our stance, and that remains our aspiration. While we are also speaking about issues around the continent, our position remains as the ANC around the plight of the people of the Palestine. And that will continue to ensure that our continent and the world discusses this matter, because that solution that should be given them is on the basis of the two-state solution. In as much as we know that Israel continues with the settlement, they are expanding them. And those are the issues that we will never be able to shy away. But we know now that there is a lot of interest by a number of countries that want to actually divide Africa. They want to be actually given a status in Africa. That matter was raised by Comrade President when he addressed us on the opening day, and it's a matter that with the progressive forces in our continent we will discuss, because our resoluteness around the people of Palestine doesn't change. As long as they are not free, they don't have their sovereignty, our struggle continues, including the people of Western Sahara for their own self-determination. Those are the issues that we are unwavering about them, because it's our foreign policy position. It's also about our ideological outlook of the kind of a society and the world we look. We have done an assessment around the issues that can cause unrest, like the one that happened in July last year. And it has been a characterization in the ANC that it was an attempted insurrection, but government responded by having its own a panel of experts that was led by Professor Cindy Africa that did an assessment. What were the root causes, the ability of the state to respond, and some of those recommendations that are mentioned in that particular report, we are ensuring that they must be implemented. We are supporting them, especially the stabilization of security services, because there was a lot of instability at the top level. And you could see that a number of appointments have been made in these various institutions. The issues around coordination are the biggest issue, because there was a discharge and the pointing of fingers. And we now have a seamless coordination and centralized in terms of the reviving of the National Security Council, chaired by the President, and the relevant structures are sitting there. And we are very satisfied that there is that proper response. But we want to admit that any possibility of other unrest might arise because of the conditions in which our people they find themselves in, and the possibility of counter-revolutionaries that can be able to abuse and exploit the current climate our people face. Our resilience in terms of intelligence, our resilience in terms of the capability of the state, but also the resilience of communities, that we need to be able to deal with these particular issues. We do agree, the ANC, there are those people who are ideologically opposed to the ANC. They remain active. There are those people who are ideologically opposed to the advances we've made in the last 28 years. And some of those that are opposed, they wanted to use our own mistakes, our own failures around issues of governance, around issues of delivery, to be able to say, take the ANC out of power. Therefore, the ANC must be agile, responsive, unite, renew, and march ahead to discharge its responsibility to serve our people. The issue of intelligence, we did discuss it. Not only the SSA, we discussed intelligence in general. And our decision is that these agencies and security cluster must be strengthened in terms of capability, in terms of leadership, and we agree that also the issues around politicization and interference must be dealt with, because these are the issues where people think that the law enforcement agencies are being weaponized. And our view is that we have to professionalize and ensure that these agencies, all of them, they are able to act without any fear or favor or prejudice. That's the attitude. Because those accusations are not starting now. Even in the dawn of democracy, even today, you will hear people raising these issues. But at the very same time, the attitude of the Commission is that if there are people politically who are trying to interfere, they must desist and cease to do that. And the law makes a provision around the abuse that if you are trying to say certain decision must be made, that law can say, you can't say this one must be prosecuted or not. The law says that you can even be jailed for 10 years. These are some of the issues that we're able to discuss to say, in principle, the law must not have eyes. We must act consistently. The other issues around all investigations, whether it is what we call a Zondo report, which is the report on the allegation on state capture, the ANC is currently processing it. Yesterday we had a discussion with Bungan, and those that are related to peace and stability, we have dealt with them, and there is an implementation, and the ANC will communicate. SIU, AG, and other reports, they must all be treated as the same and apply consistently. On the anti-corruption agents, that multidisciplinary team, is a matter that we are going to look at in the plenary. We are going to look at that particular matter even when we go to the conference, because the ANC must decide. In the main, we need that capacity. We do need it. The form and the content and the texture will be discussed by the ANC, but we want that ability to respond. Whether you are going through the former Scorpions, whether it's the FBI, whether it's the Russian Federation, a way of dealing with corruption, whether it is the Chinese, whether it is the British, the legislation that will be enacted, Comrade Pula, will actually deal with those. I'll be presumptuous if I started to say how will it look like. The ANC on its matters, internal matters, around the leadership role of our country, there is an integrity commission to deal with issues of morality and integrity. And that integrity commission, we have said, it must be strengthened, it must be able to act without any fear or favor, but at the very same time, the issues around corruption and fighting corruption, there is a view by the commission to say, we'll want the plenary to discuss the style by the Communist Party of China of our own anti-corruption commission as a demonstration of our commitment and the political will to deal with the issues of the flies, the tigers, and the foxes within our own ranks. The issues of guns and ammunition, they were discussed. It's the biggest challenge we face. There's a lot of challenges we're facing in the period during the negotiations and the early years of our democracy. we still know that there were many guns that were circulating, especially around Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal, and some of those guns have not been brought back. We also know that because of the security in the police stations and in defense, a number of guns that belong to the state have been lost, and including the issues of all the gun just management, and also the issues around ammunitions and guns that are found in the gangsters, the private security, is one of the issues that we thought that we need to tighten it in terms of gun control and gun management. Those are some of the issues, Comrade Pule, we thought we should be able to respond to. And once again, we want to thank you for organizing that. We brief them, and we are hopeful that we should be able to turn the corner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mahlobo. And thanks, members of the media. We are proceeding now straight to social transformation. Sis Lindy? Social transformation. This is one of the most important subcommittees of the ANC. Issues of social security are here. Steve, just update members of the media that Leo, just update them members of the media the social transformation.
You got it? No, it's you. Yeah, you got it. What you said, you got it. So before we go here. It's about transition. It's again. Come on. And what come on is come on. Yeah.
Okay, colleagues, evening once more. I'm going to hand over to Sis Lindy to now give you an overview on social transformation, on what they were placing before the commission. Over to you, Sis Lindy.
Very much. And good evening to members of the media. It's a very cold night, so I will not keep you here too long. We've just concluded our discussions around social transformation, and we were putting it together for presentation to the plenary tomorrow. You will know that we would have started off on a very sad note of the girl children who were raped, and especially the one who was raped by all the perpetrators. And we spent some time trying to work out what our response to this matter should be in the social transformation, to give the parents time to get to grips with this or go and see them. But we are shattered by this. We are shattered by the development of such unethical, base, animalistic tendencies amongst people who are either South Africans or who live in South Africa. And our sympathy and support goes to the parents and the children who have suffered this, and we hope to find a way of expressing our support for them in a more tangible way. But that is how we wanted to start our presentation tomorrow, because we are very concerned about the growth of violence against women. We are concerned about the growth of disrespect for women. We're concerned about the rate at which women have been dehumanized in our society. We're concerned about the growth of crime generally in South Africa in ways that have been unexpected. We had not thought that at this point we would be dealing with the kind of crimes that we're dealing with. But particularly we want women to be protected. Women have a right, possibly greater than any other species, to be protected because they are the producers of our continuity depends on them being protected. We then went on to deal with how we are going to propose that plenary deals with matters of people who are found to be to have violated women by raping them. And we all agreed that one of the first things that we will do is to propose that the chemical that chemical castration is still one of the ways in which we would like to put across to the ANC, to anybody who's found to have been guilty of rape, especially aggravated rape. This is something that the Women's League had put across at the last conference that we had of this nature, and it had been turned down as being gruesome and overreaching and all of those things. However, today, the session that we held confirmed this, and therefore this is what we're going to put across, to say that this is what we would like to have as part and parcel of the possibilities of how we punish people who violate women in this way. Because not only do they violate the woman or the physical part of the woman, they violate the dignity of the woman, they violate the very essence of what that particular woman feels about herself, take away everything that she represents. And we've got a way in which we thought we could deal with this. We were going to have a discussion with medical fraternity about how this can be administered so that we are quite certain that we are talking about the same thing. But it is called chemical castration. In fact, when the Women's League brought this, it was not chemical castration, it was physical, so we've toned it down. We worried about the way that society brings up boy children, because at the rate at which we have rapes indicates that there's something missing in the way that we bring up our boy children, and therefore we're going to have an interaction with the education department to find out if there is anything in the curriculum that deals with how young boys should understand the dignity of the other sex and actually make sure that it is protected. We're also concerned beyond rape, we're just concerned about gender-based violence. It is so much easier for men to lift a hand against a woman at any given time. It is one of the most common crimes that we have in our country, and we would like to make sure that we put an end to this. And there are a number of ways in which the women who were in the meeting had expressed that we should deal with this matter. And they are suggesting that for anybody who's found to be guilty of gender-based violence, no parole should be considered whatsoever. And perhaps then, depending on the crime itself, we leave that to the judiciary. But we would not support that there should be any parole given. We do not support that there should be any bail given either for that particular kind of crime. We would like to make sure that those people who have perpetrated the worst crimes against women should not be integrated back into society, and we're looking at a way in which this can be done. But we want to make sure that our women are protected. So largely today we were responding to what has been in the media yesterday and the day before. And the anger against what has been done to these young children almost foreshadowed everything else that we were talking about, as you would expect. That is the thing that we really were very concerned about. However, beyond that, we thought that there ought to be a special way in which young boys are brought up in school. There should be a new curriculum for them to respect other people who are not of the same sex. And we don't know where they pick up these attitudes against women, but we want to make sure that we produce a society where young boys respect young women, and that we grow up with people who respect women in the way that women should be respected. In most societies, women are revered for the fact that they are the producers of species, they are the producers of our future, and it's only in South Africa that we find that we have this violence against women growing exponentially, and we're trying to understand why. We then have decided that we would deal with the I have indicated we would deal with the curriculum and make sure that young boys are brought up to respect women. We were also faced with a number of other issues that deal with the biology of young girls. We would like to make sure that the state provides free sanitary towels for young girls at school. This we have emphasized over and over. This is something that young girls should not have to go through without the support that the state gives. The state puts out in every bathroom that you find on the road free condoms for people to use. Largely these are used by men, and if they can give free condoms to men, we think that we can give free condoms to free sanitary towels to women as well, especially those in the rural areas. But we're still working on the modalities of this. My God, I could go on the whole day about what it is that we talked about, because it is a very emotive environment that we found ourselves in, and therefore we were very focused on gender-based violence precisely because of the environment that we are dealing with this matter. But we did talk about other matters that have to do with social transformation, and that has to do with the rate at which we are integrating as racial groups in our society. This is something that is historic. How far are we in integrating ourselves and forming one nation that we call South Africa? We find that when we go to areas like a sporting environment, when we win as South Africans. When we go home to different places. And we're trying to measure how long will it take for us to cohere as one nation. We cohere as one nation when we win, but we don't cohere as one nation on a normal basis. And we were trying to work out how long will it take us to be one nation with one culture, with one value system, etc., etc. We also want to make sure that we can promote women getting into positions of authority, whether it is in the scientific world or wherever it is. We have found that women excel in most of these areas, but are not given the opportunity to advance in the area of their specialty because we have preconceived ideas about the capacity of women, and we would like to make sure that society does understand women are as capable as men. In fact, we think that we have an extra chromosome that makes women so much more special and so much more talented than men. I mean, that's meant to be a joke, okay. I see all of you are very sour about this matter. There was a suggestion that we should have a separate ministry that deals specifically with youth issues. The youth in our country feel that they are marginalized, they're not taken seriously, and the matters that concern them are just marginal to government, and therefore we should separate the youth and women's ministry, and have a youth ministry and have a women's ministry. And the youth ministry, of course, will be concentrating on all of the challenges that our youth are faced with. We live in a fast-changing world. We live in a world where so much is at their fingertips, drugs, whatever it is. How do we protect them? How does the state go out and protect them against all of these evil developments in our country? And I think that got an applause that we should have a youth ministry very soon. Therefore, we're going to propose that we separate the two ministries. Women and youth are not the same, nor are their needs the same. We then wanted to deal with the issue of alcohol abuse. We're very concerned about the rate of alcohol abuse and substance abuse in our country, and we've put a special package to understand what it is that we can do to protect our young people, especially as they develop against this. We discussed how we find ourselves as a country an entry point to drugs and all of those other things that are not helpful to society, those that harm them as children. And we found that we need to put a particular strategy around how we protect children at schools, because this is an entry point of getting them into a pattern of dependency on drugs or using them for those purposes, as to sell drugs or take drugs onto the streets. On employment equity, we thought that we needed to have a register of how we are ensuring that we can provide equal opportunities for men and women, and also for younger people in those spaces where they would fit in. As I indicated, we about 3 hours. 2 of those hours were on gender-based violence, because that is the issue that really has shocked us, and this is the issue that took a lot of our time. We then also went on to areas of how we can ensure that women feel comfortable about themselves, and how women can be empowered to be reach whatever levels they would like to reach, and ensure that they are able to look after their children without having to depend on a male in the family. We indicated that we have taken these matters into consideration as a country, which is why in human settlements, for instance, when we give out houses, we don't give out houses as a family. We give out houses and give the title deed to the woman, so that should there be a divorce, the house is retained by the woman who looks after the children, and the person who leaves the house in the case of a divorce is a man. So we went into the details of how government can support some of the issues that women are going through, and this was just one of those cases that we are dealing with. We also discovered that when we look at our statistics, the high unemployment rate amongst women is very worrying, and we're trying to understand why it is that we have this structural imbalance where most unemployed people happen to be women. We have made a great deal of gains as women, we believe, and we want to make sure that we can protect these gains as we go on, and therefore we have paid a lot of attention to the issue of women. We received a report from the Ministry of Women, which, as I've indicated, will be separated from the youth, and a great deal of progress has been made on the legislation that has been prepared by the minister in the presidency around the rights of women and the protection of women and all of those things. We paid a particular We paid particular respects to Jessie Duarte as an outstanding woman in the organization, and one who stood up for all women, and one who gave all her life to making sure that the women are represented as they should be, and who fought a good fight, who fought to make sure that most of us here are free, and we will do everything we can to honor her as women. We went on to deal with a number of other issues about changing the budget to ensure that the budget that we have is women sensitive, as it is put out by the Minister of Finance. We wanted to make sure that we can integrate social cohesion and nation building. So we will not be talking about nation building outside the sphere of social cohesion. We're very concerned about the continuing subordination of women, especially women who are in the sporting fraternity. We were given a briefing by one of the women who owns a football club and was contesting men in, is it Safa? Safa, and what she has had to go through in contesting a position of chairing Safa against men, and we realize that this is an area we need to pay particular attention to, bearing in mind that Banyana have made us so proud. We need to pay particular attention to ensure that even the upper structures that make Banyana succeed are also supported by government. We indicated we're worried about substance abuse, and we are wanting to make sure that anybody who is caught using women as a mule for transporting substances, illegal substances, gets a maximum sentence when they appear and are found guilty in our courts. We went on to ensuring that we can look at our schools and put a particular emphasis on empowering women in schools, ensuring that we can use sports facilities in schools to make women especially feel good about themselves and to stand up tall in a society that is very largely male-dominated. We want to support women in leadership positions and make sure that we can empower women through them, and we feel that women have a right, like any other species, to be whatever it is that they would like to be, and get beyond societal limits that have put women where they think women should be, largely the kitchen and somewhere in the backyard. We wanted to have an audit of the land that is available, and we would like to make sure that when we give out land, we are going to prioritize women, especially single women bringing up children. We want to have a 50-50% representation in all ANC structures between men and women. We went on for 3 hours, and as I indicated, it was a very passionate, angry, pained session because of what we've just experienced in South Africa with the rape of the little girls that were subjected to this rape a few days ago. The rest of the documentation will be given to you. We have somebody in our printing room, and by the time you leave, you will have a summary of everything that we were discussing, so that you are able to report as truthfully as it is possible for you to do so. Thank you very much. We are open for questions.
Thanks, Sis Lindy, for that comprehensive presentation of our document on social transformation. We will now open the floor for questions and allow you to engage with Comrade Lindy. Where is the roving mic? You may. So what we'll do is that, because Comrade Nkosana is already here, we'll just open for one round and then allow them to ask, and then you will answer all of them at once. You may proceed.
Good evening, Minister. On the issue of chemical castration, has the Women's League done a study to see if it's actually going to be effective? And how is it going to help me if I'm raped tomorrow and, you know, the perpetrator is convicted and castrated in prison when they've already, you know, raped me? And I'm asking this because our justice system is orientated towards correctional services more than punishment. So I'm trying to understand what exactly is it going to achieve?
Let's just take all the questions at once.
My name is Peter de Tooy from News 24. Minister, you talk about a shared value system that delegates spoke of that South Africans need to share. Given the 5,500 pages of the Zondo Commission, is the ANC in a position to lead a debate on a shared value system? Thank you.
Valentine from the SABC News. I haven't heard you, Minister, speaking about any proposals on the issue of basic income grant, which I believe would fall in your subcommittee and thereby being discussed by the Commission. So I would like to hear if there have been any proposals, as we know that South Africa population, most of them are living below poverty line. Thank you.
Abongile Dumago, SABC News. Sisulu, with regards to the youth department that would have been proposed, was there any detail on how this youth department should sort of be structured, separate from the presidency, like a standalone kind of youth department? How are the details in as far as that is concerned, saying that there's always been a complaint that South Africa is a bloated cabinet? Thank you.
Bali Tetani, Newsroom Africa. Minister, you touched a bit on the issue around free sanitary towels for young girls and for women in general. This is a conversation that has been going on now for more than 10 years. And you are saying that government is still working on the modalities of how it will go about in terms of distributing sanitary towels for free. What seems to be the stumbling block in terms of, you know, trying to find a way of actually distributing this to young girls and to women in general? Thank you.
Is it all? Okay, that's fine. No, you can take all of them. Looks like this is only the only questions we have.
I wanted to start with a question that I just need clarity on. That after the Zondo Commission, do we have shared value system? I didn't understand what you meant by that.
I asked, given the Zondo Commission, is the ANC in a position to talk about a shared value system? Given the 5.5 pages detailing ANC's role in corruption, is the ANC in a position to talk about a shared value system? Can the ANC lead that debate?
Yes, I'd like to start with that. The Zondo Commission was set up to deal with a particular period and a particular information that came to light. I don't know in what way shared vision comes into that question. Not unless you are indicating that the ANC does not have shared values with other people, that we have a different system of values from other people, and that is not the case. The Zondo Commission was established after we decided that we needed to get to the bottom of how some things had gone wrong, and it was out there for everybody to read, out there for everybody to follow through. It did not indicate that there was any particular grouping of people, or that the ANC was a particular species that did not have shared values with everybody else. We have shared values. We've grown up in the same country. The reason why we want greater integration is so that there should not be any other time where people feel that other people are different from them. The only thing that's different between me and you is the color of our skin. Our orientation should not be different. We should go to the same schools. The way that our value systems should not be different, because we are all South Africans. When you ask that question, you are indicating to me that you believe we do not have shared value systems. We do. We fought a very long struggle to make sure that we are recognized as being equal to anybody else, because we share the same values. We share the same values that any other independent country shares about their people. We share the same values about that anybody has, to ensure that we can provide for our people, that we can get our people out of poverty, that we can get South Africa to be a better world than the one that we inherited. So I'd like to indicate to you that I don't agree with your question. The Zondo Commission was an incident at which we looked at what had happened at a particular time. We've had a TRC before, at which we looked at how the apartheid state had conducted itself, how it had used chemical weapons, how it had against unprotected black people, and all the atrocities that were brought onto us. But we forgave that and moved on. There is nothing here that would suggest that we do not have shared values. The next question was one that is a very raw one. It is a question about, if you get raped today and the sentence is that one of chemical castration, how does it help one who has been raped? There's very little that within the system that we live in we can do anything about somebody until they actually have been found guilty of the crime that they are accused of. So we would allow the normal judicial processes to go through, and then when we discover that in fact there was a rape and the verdict is a guilty verdict, only then are we suggesting that what we would propose is that there should be chemical castration of that particular person so that this does not happen again. But it is a suggestion. It is a suggestion that was given by the Women's League at the last conference and rejected by the conference. We're putting it forward again, and we're waiting to see what the conference will say tomorrow. But we are hoping that our security services will find a way in which our young people, especially our young women, are protected. The rate at which crime is happening against our women is unacceptable. And this is the only way that we think that we can put out something that indicates that we want to protect our young people, we want to protect women. And we wait until tomorrow to hear whether this is something that the ANC will buy into. But there is very little that will help anybody who has been raped until the processes of the court case have gone through and the person who is accused has been found to be guilty of a rape. This is unfortunately the way that the judicial system works. This is unfortunately the way that our system works. Did we discuss the issue of grinding poverty in our country and how we're going to get our country out of poverty? Yes, we did tangentially, because we find that that for some reason some people, especially women, are trapped in not only in their own gender but also in poverty, grinding poverty and unemployment. So we dealt with it tangentially because, as I indicated right from the beginning, because we didn't know we were going to come and engage with you tonight, we spent a great deal of time expressing ourselves of what has happened to this country in the last 2 days, and the greater part was around that. And how do we solve that? How do we protect our young children? How do we make sure that this scourge of violence against women is stopped at some point? So we didn't go into detail around poverty, but most of our documents that we have been using over the period of time that we have been in this committee, we have been dealing with poverty, because in South Africa, poverty wears a black face. In South Africa, poverty wears a woman's facade. How would you operate on the sanitary towels? No, we did not find a way on how we would provide for free sanitary towels. We were dealing with policy and principle. When this is accepted, which we hope will be accepted, then we will be dealing with the modus operandi. How do we go about it? How do we make sure that every young person who needs a sanitary towel gets a sanitary towel? Because they have a right to that. And the state, we believe that the state has a responsibility of making their lives a little more dignified, that the period that they need to have protection is protected fully by the state. But tomorrow, when these are accepted, we will then go into the nitty-gritty of just how do we do it? Just how do we do it? But we also had the opportunity to look at other opportunities that we have of getting other types of protection for that period other than the sanitary towel. There is a young woman doctor who has developed a cap that can be used, which is cheap and can be rinsed out every time that there is a necessity to do that. So we will be looking at other ways in which we can protect our women, but we just wanted to make sure that they are protected and that that protection is free, that no child goes to school feeling uncomfortable because they don't have the money to buy the necessary sanitary towels. I don't know if there's any other questions that I may.
The youth department.
The youth department is a concept that we're putting across so that we can separate youth from women. Women and youth are two separate entities in our society, and they should be treated as two separate entities. Youth have their own needs, they have their own desires, have their own views about life, and they should not be lumped together with women. And that is a decision that we have come to, and we will be putting it, yes, of course, for now under the presidency, because that is how we have constituted the cabinet, but beyond that we did not go into any details about how we're going to go about it.
Okay. Are we? Why is that? It was your question? Huh? Remember, I did indicate that because of the time constraints, we still have got to take Babanko Saza. Oh, okay. No, it's not. Don't worry. We will answer it. Okay. What's your the roving mic? The roving mic. You can start with your Sis Lindy. There's a follow-up question.
I don't believe, Minister, I got a clear answer with regards to any proposals on basic income grant.
Yes,
maybe to add on top of that, have there been any discussions in terms of the extension of the social relief of distress grants beyond next year's end of March?
Yes.
Those two questions, may I please get a clear answer so that when we report, we don't report without getting clear answer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, we did discuss the basic.
There's another. Let's take just all the follow-up. Okay. Sorry.
I'm so sorry, Minister. It's Natasha Perry here from SABC News. Just to expand on my colleague's question, I mean, we had this conversation yesterday. In terms of the extension of the child support grant from 18 to 21 years old, were there any discussions about the feasibility of this proposal? Because I know Treasury wasn't so keen on the feasibility of this proposal. So just clarity on that, please. Thank you.
Okay. Did you get do you want to repeat yourself, Nadine?
I just put the mic a little further away from.
So that we can hear what you're saying.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry, just discussions around the feasibility of the extension of the child support grant from 18 to 21 years old. Thank you.
Feasibility of increasing age.
Hi, very briefly, thank you so much. Good evening, Minister. My name is Sam Kokeli. As listening to and also trying to follow up to the Sunday Times question about the chemical castration and the rape issue. Aren't you concerned that you are dealing with a genuine issue, or as you say it was, but you are responding in a tad populist way with regards to public policy making? Your solution, for example, chemical castration, and the question is whether you've done studies around it, but maybe countries like Pakistan, they've introduced it, it happens in Thailand, but also whether it would be applicable to South Africa's constitutional nature, whether it would meet constitutional muster, but most importantly, whether it is really prohibitive. When you look at the issue of the death penalty, there's overwhelming evidence that it is not prohibitive. And what is that you are really trying to solve? And your solutions seem to be on the very populist side of things. We hear you talk about, for example, the youth unemployment crisis, and your solution is to split up a department that has no budget when the issue cuts across society. Surely youth issues can never be reduced to a pocket of a department under a president when they are cutting right across a society. Youth issues affect the elderly, for example. So your solutions, Minister, I'm really, with due respect, are very simplistic in terms of public policy. Thank you.
Okay, no, yeah, I'm sure they will clarify your question.
Yes, you know, Kokeli, it's very easy for you to talk about populists. We were called here to come and discuss with you what we discussed. That's exactly what we're doing. Tomorrow, these will be put before plenary, at which they will then be explained further. They might not be adopted, they may be adopted. I'm indicating to you what was discussed. And I'm indicating to you too the background against which we had this discussion, which might not be the background that you have had, but we have had that background. And therefore, you might think that we're being populist, but we were responding also to the circumstances that we find ourselves in, where we have to ask ourselves, how does our country get to this point of banality? How do we get to where we are? And if the response to that is populist, it would be unfortunate. But we will put this to plenary tomorrow, and the ANC itself, which is gathered here, will decide which of these they will accept, which of these they might want to tamper with, which of these they might want to throw out. As I indicated last year at the conference, the Women's League had come up with a suggestion of chemical castration. It was thrown out of the conference as unacceptable and unsustainable. It does not mean it was not discussed. So what we are bringing to you was what was discussed, untampered with by anybody else, straight from the meeting. Okay? Right. By tomorrow, we will probably be bringing to you what has been discussed, what has been accepted, and what has not been accepted. Do you think that is okay? That you might temper your language somewhat yourself? Okay. We were not being populist. We were responding to a practical situation that is an ongoing problem that women in this country are experiencing at a greater rate than anywhere else that we have known in modern society. Now, on the basic income grant, we were the committee that actually made it possible for us to provide our people during the lockdown in COVID with the 350 rands as an interim measure for their sustainability. And we realized as we were discussing this matter that it was possible to go beyond that and deal with the basic income grant. We had several meetings with Treasury to see whether or not it is possible within the limited resources that we have to introduce this right now, or whether perhaps we might want to continue with the 350 for a particular period of time. This is something that is still on the table. The Minister of Finance will give the final verdict on this because it is something that will have to be factored into the budget. And I think that when he gave a briefing a few days ago, he did indicate that this was on the table, and he is trying to work out how we get around making sure that we can have this as an ongoing and sustainable method of ensuring that those people who have no access to any resources whatsoever or any other means will be supported by the state.
Extension of the child support grant.
Yes.
It is done for those who are at university.
It has already been done for those youngsters who are at university, and we will be going again into greater detail with the Minister of Finance before we can finalize and calculate and say this is what we're going to do about it. But so far, this is something that we've been dealing with over a period of time for the last year or so, incrementally, to ensure that we can support the most vulnerable in our society. Yes, the child support grant, we are thinking of increasing that. We have already agreed to increasing those who are at the grant of those who are at university, and any other grant cannot be decided by ourselves alone. It has to take into account the Minister of Finance. By the time we give our final verdict of what we have agreed to, we will be sitting here with the Minister of Finance so that we're speaking the same language and the same with the same emphasis, and we have the money to deal with what it is that we want to support our society on. Was that the last one? Yeah. But I would like, Kokeli, for you to withdraw the populist string.
Okay, Kokeli.
I'm sorry, Sis Lindy, we're not going to agree on that one. Thank you.
Oh, I think you're being very populist yourself then.
Okay, this now brings us to the end of, okay?
You know, Mkokeli, I just want you to put yourself in the position of the mother of the child who was raped 10 times. And tell me how you would be sitting there and feeling. And we did explain to you that we're dealing with this against a background of a great deal of pain to all the women in this country, that this should happen in our time. If it doesn't touch you, then it means that you belong to a different species altogether. We are very pained, and most of what we talked about today emanates from that pain, that we should be able to protect the most vulnerable in our society, that we should be able to protect our women, that we should protect anybody who needs our protection, because that is what the Constitution lays down as part of our responsibility. We've come this far in our struggle so that we can protect everybody in this country, and that nobody should feel that they are in any way vulnerable to anything outside of what is considered normal society. We want to normalize our society. And if we go extreme to normalize our society, we will do so. Thank you very much.
No, thanks, Sis Lindy, for the responses given and for the clarity provided, especially that we are simply here putting forward discussions that happened in the commission. Plenary might make different determinations, which is what Sis Lindy has clarified. Once we've got proper decisions, we'll come back to the media again and pronounce ourselves on those decisions. Thank you very much. We're now moving to health, education, science and technology, which is going to be led by Mama Nkosazana. So it's rolling coverage, comrades. So, colleagues from the media, we are going to roll the way that we have been rolling. We will indicate which other paper comes after this one. But we're trying to make sure that we cover as much ground as possible today. Steve, once they are done getting out, let's just try and close the door. Ninjani, ma'am. Ninjani. Yes, I cut out a little. I cut it. I need to teach you for us to place a wonky, so that by the time we do these decisions, they already were placed in the public. Just to make society. Okay, can I now hand over to Mama Nkosazana to proceed with the presentation, and then thereafter we'll invite yourselves for clarities or questions that you may have. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I was told, and I hope I got it right,
yes.
I was told that I must do highlights.
Yeah, you can do highlights. It's fine. What?
That's what I was informed.
Yes.
Let me greet the ladies and gentlemen of the media. We were in the commission that deals with education, health, science, technology, and innovation. And of course, we started by looking at some of the decisions that were taken before, like the decisions that were taken in the 54th conference of the ANC. And if you look at our commission and the subcommittee, it deals with almost the foundation of everything, because education and skills, health, is central to everything that a country does, whether it's in the economy or in any other sector. And the 54th conference had decided that we must have a skills revolution. So we examined that in terms of the skills revolution, how far we've gone in implementing that. And then the delegates then decided to look and to say what else they think should be done. And I'll try and give you highlights per sector, starting with basic education. Then I'll go to post-schooling or higher education. Then I'll go to health. Then I'll end with science and technology. Basic education, what is very urgent in basic education is to deal with overcrowding of classes right now. And there is a program that must be put in place to deal with that urgently. And they are looking at communities and their schools to build extra classes. Instead of going through a long process, they will ask the school itself, and they've already started doing that, and they find that it's actually cheaper. But that's what the delegate said. It's in the short term, they need to decongest the classes. Then we also looked at the issue of the education itself. If you recall, the president talked about whether the education that we are giving to our kids is preparing them for the economy. Is it producing the right results? In terms of basic education, the discussion was about ensuring that there are 3 streams to that education. Instead of just kids starting school right up to matric, we proposing, in fact, that decision has been taken. Now it was a matter of saying we should accelerate the implementation so that a lot of children, when they finish matric, they would have had, when they finish schooling, they would have had a skill. And those skills would be useful to the economy. Because a lot of kids drop out before they write matric. But if you were giving them skills, those who are not so academically inclined, or those who want to study a particular line, whether it's oceans, whether it's robotics, whether it's whatever, so that we don't have people spending 12 years and not having anything that they can do. That's one of the issues. The other issues in basic education was the issue of schools for children with special needs. That we need to pay attention to that, because some of the kids are not even identified. They go to a normal school, but they actually have special needs. So there must be a proper program that identifies them if they go to a normal school, but there must be schools that specialize on those kids so that they are not disadvantaged by being in a school with children who don't have special needs. And of course, the issue of just making sure that the infrastructure generally, not just the agent now of decongesting schools, but the infrastructure in schools. And then going to higher education or post-schooling, that's when we spent a lot of time there discussing about the skills. Because again, not everybody wants to be a research scientist or a researcher or wants to be a lecturer. When you finish matric, you should be able to not necessarily go to university if you don't want to, but be able to get a skill, especially because we have millions. Stats SA says there are about 9.1 million young people who are neither at school or in training or in a job. So that's a serious matter. So we need to pay attention to those. So there was a lot of discussion about TVET colleges, one, that they need to be rolled out a lot more, but also that the TVET colleges should offer courses that equip young people to contribute to the economy or to start their own businesses or be able to get into the economy. So that's TVETs that must be rolled out and that must concentrate on giving young people a skill, a trade, and train artisans. There was also a discussion about the role of sitters in training, because you find that, I'm just going to make an example of potholes in some of our roads. And those potholes sometimes are in municipal roads. So if we should work closely with sitters so that they could assist in providing training for young people to maintain the roads. And that will then assist these young people to have a skill, to have a job, but also communities to have roads that are properly maintained. Also, we need to look at SOEs also in terms of training. In the past, SOEs used to do a lot of training, and we should be also looking at that. But the emphasis was really on getting skills. Of course, there are those higher skills of engineers and others that are at universities, but for every engineer you need technicians, you need artisans. So also vocational schools are also important. So this was really a big discussion. There was a big discussion around that, because that will assist. You know, South Africa sometimes doesn't have simple skills. I remember when Eskom was building some of the power stations, we had to import boiler makers and other skills like that that could easily be produced in the country. So the discussion was that we must produce those skills that are needed. There was also a discussion about entrepreneurship, that we must look at the curriculum at universities, because when people come out of universities, they think about jobs, getting a job, instead of creating jobs themselves. But the discussion was that in looking at the curriculum, you should also bring in, there must be a close working relationship between the academics and industry, because the academics should also understand what are the needs of industry, what they are training young people to do. And so there was a discussion around that, which is important, because we don't want to produce job seekers. We also want to produce people who will create jobs themselves and who will go into business. There was also a discussion about aligning the needs of industry, what is being done in the TVETs, but also what is done in the 3 streams in education, in basic education. And if I were to maybe move away from higher education, of course, there was also a discussion about the skills master plan, because even though there is a plan, but we need to make it long term to say, when are we going to produce enough engineers in this area, in that area, in that area? What would it take in terms of budget? How many can we produce a year? And so on, a very detailed plan that we need. And then I'll go to health. Of course, the big issue in health is the NHI, National Health Insurance. The bill is in Parliament, but the preparations for its implementation is what was discussed also. Because people have to be registered for NHI. And there was a discussion about not disadvantaging poor people or rural people in terms of that registration, so that everybody should have equal access to the registration. And that registration is ongoing. At least there are more than 50 million who have already been registered. So that's good progress in terms of the preparations, but it's something that has to address the access, equalize the access to health care. Because at the moment, the access to health care depends on whether you have medical aid or not, whether you live in an area where there are good hospitals, whether you live in an area where there are no clinics. There was also the issue of ambulances, that we must increase the number of ambulances so that they are available to everyone, and they also take a short time to come to the scene. So it was a more practical discussion about what should be done in health. Of course, the training, because we have to have enough personnel, was also a matter for discussion. And also, there was a big discussion around the district development model approach to health, because health is not, what happens in health is not determined by the health department or health sector alone. There are lots of things which are health determinants. Whether you have access to clean water or not determines what happens to your health. Whether you have a balanced meal and you have proper nutrition determines what happens to your health. Whether you live in a clean environment or not determines what happens to your health. Whether there is proper sanitation. So we have to, health has to work closely with other departments so that those health determinants are attended to. There was also discussion about substance abuse, because substance abuse has a lot of influence on health, but also has influence on violence and gender-based violence. But it also has influence on the pressure on hospitals. We saw during COVID how when alcohol was not being sold, how hospitals, especially emergency services, were not under pressure like they normally are, especially on weekends. So health determinants are very important in terms of getting our health services in good shape, but also healthy lifestyles determine what happens to health because they are part of prevention. So there was a discussion also along those lines, because we don't, you know, when, in a way, when somebody ends up in hospital, it means there's been a failure in prevention, sometimes in health determinants, children with diarrhea because they're drinking water that is not clean and so on. So we'll rather have fewer people going to hospital and more people living healthier. Those were some of the highlights in health. Of course, the health infrastructure, because there's still a long way in terms of having adequate health infrastructure across the country. Also, though this is not a health issue or an education issue, but it has a lot of influence in terms of the ICT connectivity, access to internet. We saw during COVID how that differentiated people. Some people were forced to leave their homes to go and buy groceries. Others could order online and get it delivered to them. Some kids were able to attend classes online when others couldn't. So it's a very important issue for the sector, whether it's health or education. It's a very important issue. Then, if we go to science, technology, and innovation, the discussion there was about whether we keep science and technology just as an enabler, especially technology, or do we start looking at it as something that can assist us in creating jobs, in accelerating development in the country. And also that we need to look at it in a blend way. What are we trying to solve? We must use technology to solve societal problems. We must use technology, of course, to advance the economy. We must also use technology to look at issues around climate change and so on. So this was, and what can we do to assist young people? Because we have a young population. So science and technology should assist us to ensure that young people are able to innovate, are assisted in their innovation, but also create jobs for them. And the support to young people who innovate, because we've seen a lot of young people who come up with very innovative ideas, but they don't have support. Sometimes even those ideas are stolen by those who can afford, and they develop them. And there was also stress in terms of ensuring that young people, as they develop and innovate, they protect their intellectual property. Because you find that young people come with innovative ideas, not only in South Africa, but elsewhere, and then they don't protect that intellectual property, and it gets stolen by others, who then register it as their own. So there was also a discussion to say we must accelerate. There is a decision that was taken some time back, not in the last conference, maybe 2 conferences back, about having a state-owned pharmaceutical company. So this actually is about everything. It's about skills, it's about health, it's about science and technology. So that must now be accelerated. And it must also include, we must also include in that medical equipment, because we saw during COVID how we didn't have enough ventilators. We had to import them at very high cost, and other PPEs, which we could have produced ourselves in the country. So that was also an issue. But also looking at vaccines, shouldn't we also be looking at producing our own vaccines and developing our capacity in terms of vaccine production? and maybe working with the Greek BRICS partners and so maybe let me end there because you said highlights.
No. To invite the questions from members of the media. Okay. We'll have a roving mic and then, yeah. So we'll take all the questions and then you will answer once they are done. Okay.
Thank you, Bule. It's Natasha Puri here from SABC News again. Oh, sorry, can you hear me now? Sorry. I just want to know, were there any discussions around the urgent finalization of a framework for regulating higher education fees in colleges and universities by next year? Thank you. Should I repeat the question? You can't hear me?
Yeah.
Was there any discussion around the urgent finalization of a framework for regulating higher education fees in colleges and
Framework to regulate higher education funding by fees by 2023 by next year.
Good evening, Africa. I just want to know, was there really a discussion on whether someone should be looking at whether or not we should be producing our own vaccines? The fact that we were almost at the end of, other countries in terms of receiving vaccines for COVID, was that not a sign that actually we must develop our own vaccines? It shouldn't be a discussion as to whether or not we should be developing a vaccine. Should the discussion not have been, when do we actually start producing our own vaccines? Because we've seen from a number of reports that that probably more pandemics are coming. So what are we doing now about protecting ourselves from those future vaccines, instead of us, or the ANC at least, talking about, whether or not we should be producing our own vaccines? I think that we must produce them, ma'am. We can't be talking about whether or not we should. So I just want to know, is the question not when do we start instead of should we be starting? Thank you.
That is on vaccines, no?
Yes, sir.
Good evening, ma'am. It's JJ from the Sunday World. Mine is related to health. A province like Eastern Cape, for example, has about 38 billion medical legal claims. Have you looked at such issues? Because in this amount, apparently about 99% of those claims come from children who have been born with sorry, I just need to quickly check this word. Cerebral palsy. Is that because Eastern Cape is a rural province and most of time, and also the, with limited maternity wards. And most of times, according to what I gathered, is that this cerebral palsy comes as a result of babies not being delivered in time. Thank you.
I think the acoustics is not. I'm asking him if he heard the question.
You want to repeat yourself, JJ?
We just heard you talk about medical legal, and then you said maybe from children we lost you after that.
Okay, basically my question is that, have you looked on the health matters issues such as the medical legal claims? Because a province like Eastern Cape has about 38 billion medical legal claims, and most of them are from children or babies that have been born with, I keep forgetting this word.
Cerebral palsy or something.
Palsy, yeah.
Cerebral palsy or...
Sorry?
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and I was told it's as a result of babies not being delivered in time. Because
Were there any discussions about better regulating alcohol? There were a lot of suggestions, I think, during lockdown when there were discussions around alcohol. And a lot of people say if you regulate it better, the sale of alcohol, make sure it's sold in certain places and certain times. Did the ANC
Good evening. My name is Veli Mtiane from the SABC News. A couple of questions. Question number one, were there any discussions with regards to improving doctor-patient because of what we know in the public hospitals, that you usually find long lines, people having to spend 2 to 3 days just to queue to get a doctor, something that we have often reported on because of the shortage of doctors. That's number one. Number two, with regards to the establishment of the state-owned pharmaceutical company, it's not a new policy proposal. The question would be, what has been a stumbling block in implementing or in ensuring that this is implemented? And two, what is the deadline that you have given yourself? Because any policy proposal has to come with a deadline. If we are saying we need a state-owned entities, there should be reasons, there should be timeline and deadlines. And then last question would be on the higher education. Has there been any discussion with regards to reviewing what is being offered at the universities? I tell you what, because at universities usually the cohort that becomes larger in terms of enrollment is in general BSc, general humanities, which will be a BA or BSoc science, and that's where mainly there are no jobs, because also in terms of the scoring, they require less than other fields where there are jobs. Has there been any proposal to review if there is is the money that NSFAS is spending worth funding such studies? Because they are largely forming the enrollments, BScs, generals, humanities, and then they go out, they want to find jobs, no skills.
Abongile Dumago, SABC News. Mama, ngicela ubuza with regards to what we spoke about, in fact, when you started with regards to the overcrowding in primary schools and your high schools, especially in the township areas. You said there's a short-term proposal or a short-term solution with regards to, for example, government coming into sort of working together with the communities to try and sort of work on this, the fact that there's overcrowding at schools. But I want to find out, how is that done? Do you sort of reach out as government to community to say, maybe let's Nkazata for additional classrooms at school, or how does it work? As you have alluded earlier, I want to say, actually it's being seen as a sort of short-term solution to try and alleviate overcrowding at schools. Thank you.
Okay, is that the last one?
Okay, thank you. Maybe starting just with the last one. What they've been doing, in some instances, they've been giving the money to the school. Obviously, the school governing bodies and so on, and trying to get them to get local people who are able to build and to build the extra classrooms. And that works out faster and cheaper. That's what they've been doing. And then in reviewing the curriculum, I did say that there was a discussion about reviewing the curriculum at universities and trying to get the universities to link with industry so that they know what industry needs and train and tailor their curriculum to be able to attend to the needs of industry. Because at the moment it's just a curriculum, people just study and they finish studying, they sit at home, they are unemployed graduates. So yes, there was a discussion, and that's when there was even a discussion that they can't change their curriculum on their own. They must be linked with industry. They must also understand what is happening out there in industry. So yes, there was that discussion. And then in terms of the pharmaceutical company, state pharmaceutical company, what was the stumbling block which is now still being resolved is the way Treasury rules about procurement work, because they were saying you build a state company, but that state company will be treated exactly the same as any other company, and which is a bit problematic because we have to prioritize in our procurement. We're not saying that it mustn't be competitive, it must be competitive, but we must prioritize it if it's a state company. If we don't buy from our own state company, who do we expect will buy from it? So that is a discussion that's taking place now, and we are hoping that that will be resolved soon. But that was one of the big stumbling blocks, because then it was felt that then there'll be a problem if we just build a state company and we don't procure from it. The doctor-to-patient relations ratio, of course, it's not just that. There's a discussion about how to improve the services by improving the number of personnel in the hospitals, whether it's nurses or doctors. And that is part of the reason, for instance, we have even some of the kids being trained in Cuba and other places to try and augment the number of doctors that are produced here. But of course, those doctors that come from Cuba, the advantage is that they come and work in South Africa, whereas some of the people who are trained here, some of the universities here in South Africa, if you look at the number of doctors they produce and how many of them actually stay and work here and not go to America or Canada or somewhere, you'll find that, yes, we produce them, but a lot of them go and work in Europe or somewhere else. So, yes, I think that discussion will always be there until we get the ratio right. But also, it was also part of the discussion was about building academic hospitals, particularly in Limpopo. So that is on the cards, because it's easier then to train doctors when you have an academic hospital also. There was an issue also of academic hospitals in other provinces, but The one that was put strongly was the Limpopo one. The issue of regulating alcohol, we didn't really discuss it at length except as discussing it in terms of it being part of those determinants that put pressure on our facilities, but also that cause accidents. But in terms of how to regulate it, that would be a trade and industry issue, not so much a health issue, because that's where the regulations about those kind of industries are done. So maybe in that commission they would have discussed it. If not, maybe you can ask that commission whether they did discuss it. And then the issue of medical legal, it's a big problem, not only in the Eastern Cape, but also in Gauteng and other places. There was a discussion, even though not at length, but looking at whether should there be a scheme like the road accident fund or something to deal with that. But I must say it wasn't a long discussion, but there was a discussion about whether maybe we should have something like that, equivalent to the road accident fund. The issue of producing vaccines was discussed, as I said, in the context of a state pharmaceutical company, that we shouldn't just look at the state pharmaceutical company, but we should also look at it producing our own vaccines. I even said there was a discussion about linking with maybe the BRICS partners who have a lot of experience in producing vaccines. So yes, it was discussed. And then the first one was on stabilizing funding by next year. Was that discussed specifically? Next year, no. It wasn't discussed specifically in terms of stabilizing it by next year, but there were discussions about funding of students from working class in the context of NSFAS and whether NSFAS should be decentralized to the provinces or not, but there was no conclusive. People were just throwing ideas around, more around the administration of NSFAS. So that part was not necessarily discussed. Yeah, I think I've answered your questions.
Okay. Look, can you ask that the vaccine? He was asking about vaccine manufacturing. Is it a follow-up?
Yes.
Huh? Or your question was not?
Yeah, sorry ma'am, it's Lucanio again. Unfortunately I can't stand because I block the cameras when I stand, so you'll pardon me talking to you sitting down. I understand, ma'am, that the issue of producing vaccines was discussed. I get that it was discussed. The question to me was, should the discussion not be about when do we actually start producing vaccines, not whether or not we should be producing them, but when do we start? Because for me, I think it's great to have the discussion, but is it not important to then put certain timelines to it? We know that we must produce vaccines. We must. It's not whether or not we should. We must produce them. But how soon can we actually start producing our own? So in that way, we're not dependent on the Americans for their intellectual property. And our president having to go around the world fighting for, I forgot the term, or for wavering, or, for waiving intellectual property. Whereas if we had produced our own COVID-19 vaccine in time, we would not have had to beg the other countries for their assistance in this regard.
Yes, we agree with you, but of course, you have to take a decision. You are producing our vaccines. Then you have to say what's the feasibility study and all those things. And the reason we were stressing the acceleration of a pharmaceutical company is because we don't want to have the same time that it has taken the pharmaceutical company to be built, to have that whole discussion again. So we want to accelerate the pharmaceutical companies so that we also produce our own vaccines. Of course, that doesn't stop vaccines being produced in the private sector. We're talking, this was a discussion in relation to a state company producing vaccines. But in terms of the private sector, they should be. I hope they are, actually. Having learned from COVID and having seen it was a very lucrative business as well. So I do hope, but this discussion was in relation to a state company that will produce other pharmaceuticals, including vaccines. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mama Nkosazana. Members of the media have been clarified. We are done with education, health, science and technology. Thanks for the highlights and for the answers we have provided to members of the media. They are getting more empowered with this engagement, which is helpful. Yes. So we are going to take legislature and governance as well as international relations, because both the chairs are here, and then we'll then entertain the questions once they have all done their highlights. We are moving. Yeah. Angithi nithunywe ukuthi nizawukhabarisha i-policy conference. Yeah, uyabuya lo msebenzi lo. Okay, she. Okay. So we're going to have Comrade Phumulo, who's the chair of the Legislature and Governance Subcommittee, giving highlights on what they presented to plenary, and we're going to have Lindiwe Sisulu, who's the chair of the International Relations Subcommittee, giving highlights on the international relations paper. Should it be? We don't have media people outside, because we are going to close the door. No, Steve, you don't want to, you don't have somewhere outside, because when we start, we close the door. Yo, it's 3 hours. Eh? I'm going for 4 hours now. Yes. You. Since
what's happening with Sis Lindiwe?
Sis Lindiwe, We are already live on television, so we need to just
Sit in the middle.
you can sit here. You can sit for the optics. Doesn't look right. Okay, we're about to start now. So starting IR, then Susan. Okay, we'll start with IR and then take legislature and governance, and then afterwards open the floor.
I was saying the optics.
The optics don't you need to do.
I thought you would start with the...
No, start. Okay, good evening once more, members of the media. We are still moving with the presentation of the highlights of what would have transpired in commissions on the various policy discussion documents. We will get that briefing now on international relations led by Comrade Lindiwe Sisulu, as well as legislature and governance led by Comrade Pomola. Over to Mrs. Lindy.
Okay, I have to hold it. Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for this opportunity. I know it's late in the hour and it's been a bit hectic for all of us. From a perspective of international relations, first and foremost, I'm speaking to people who we've had a briefing before, presenting our policy document. And now at the discussion level, we started by reaffirming all the resolutions that had been taken at the 54th conference. And we then went into talking about the fact that it's important for the African National Congress to ensure that government does implement those resolutions. And the discussions were included the fact that if government, as the government of the African National Congress, has got challenges in implementing some of those resolutions, there's got to be proper communication at all times within the African National Congress itself, but also within broader society, so that there's no ambiguity in any of the resolutions that have been taken. The other issue that was very strongly discussed was the fact that we should at all times ensure that international relations and foreign policy is not discussed in isolation of the overall strategies of the African National Congress, whether it's strategy and tactics, whether it's peace and stability, but including the fact that we do international relations for no other purpose than to make sure that we address the issues and challenges that face South African people, and that at all times the people are at the center of what we do. Because sometimes when you talk international relations, people look at it from far, whereas it's got everything to do with peace, security, stability, as well as economic development. There was also, in the same breath, it was said that we must make sure that international relations and foreign policy also responds to the challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, which therefore means the growing of the economy and creation of jobs must be at the center of the political work that we do from international relations and foreign policy point of view. And what we then did in order for us not to lose sight, we went back to the way the issues are structured in terms of the resolutions that were taken at the 54th conference, which therefore meant we needed to discuss contributing to building a better Africa and a better world, and therefore going into discussions about South Africa's relations from a point of view of SADC and all other regions to a point of building the institutions of governance in the African continent, including the AU, We also then went specifically, and we went in depth in terms of discussing the African Union itself, the roles and responsibility of the AU and the Pan-African, the AU and the structure of the AU and the leadership in the AU, and the role of South Africa in influencing positive decisions that are taken at the AU level. We also went into continental and international solidarity, and it is at this point that we had stronger discussions about those countries that are still struggling, like the Sahrawi, and our role in solidarity. We also spoke about other international solidarity in terms of Palestine, in terms of Venezuela, in terms of Sahrawi. We also spoke to the issue of transformation of global governance institutions, as is in the document. And the issue of transformation of global governance, we went into discussion about the challenges. For instance, when I arrived here, we were busy talking about the issue of the vaccines and so forth. And we still insist that the decisions of the African National Congress's 54th conference in terms of the transformation of global governance and ensuring that the transformation of these global governance institutions have got an impact in resolving many of the global challenges that are faced, including the war between Russia and Ukraine, and affirming ourselves that we still believe that a peaceful resolution and the usage of those global institutions in making sure that such conflicts are resolved peacefully. We also then spoke about policy development issues, and also affirmed that, as I indicated earlier on, we must not wait when we are unable to implement certain policies. We must be able to engage our branches. We also, in terms of contributing to building a better Africa and a better world, one of the issues that was really discussed at length was the current position of Israel in terms of its position with the AU, and we still confirmed that as far as South Africa is concerned, we still believe that Israel shouldn't be given the status that it has been calling for at the AU, and that South Africa needs to continue to fight for the Palestinian and South Africa. The ANC must continue to not agree to Israel's push for being in the AU. We also said that we must be vigilant in our relationship with trade partners like the EU, who seek to smuggle their issues through other mechanisms when they fail in negotiations with the AU, and that we may need to have a stronger voice in relation to the conflict in Ukraine. And a stronger voice is about consistent engagement. Our president, from a point of view of government, engaging, but also making sure that at the level of the United Nations and other organizations, our voice must be held. We also dealt with the issue of Zimbabwe, and we said that we must be able to continuously and consistently raise the issues of peace, security and stability in Zimbabwe, and in particular considering the fact that we are affected a lot as South Africa in relation to people crossing over to South Africa, but we have a very strong relationship with ZANU-PF, and therefore there mustn't be a difficulty in us engaging in that. We also referred to the issue of economic development. In particular, we must make use of we have a strategic use of the AFCFTA, especially with the South African at the helm, and we must support and resource it where necessary. But also we said what needs to happen is that our diplomats who are in the African continent and elsewhere must make sure that they continue to fight they continue to look for opportunities, particularly economic opportunities for South Africans. With regard to the Continental International Solidarity, I've already spoken to other issues, but one of the important issues that was raised was to sustain our efforts towards a reformed UN system. I've already said that. We also spoke about the issue of Morocco and Morocco's engagement in Africa, and its admittance in the EU remains problematic while the country continues to colonize Western Sahara, and that we must not lose sight as South Africa on this issue. We also spoke about the ICC. I'm sure everyone will be interested in that. And we said that we can use the ICC to address Israel's action and even the issue on issues of Venezuela. In the two-state solution, we were asking ourselves the question whether this is still viable, in particular when you see that Israel has been taking more and more land illegally. And I can't go through everything. Oh, what I think is also important here, we also reaffirmed the ANC's 54th National Conference resolution for downgrading of South Africa's relation with Israel, and we support the calls for the lifting of punitive and cruel sanctions against Venezuela, Iran, Cuba, Syria, Korea, elsewhere, where such sanctions have been imposed unilaterally and unjustly. And we also went into talking about our relationship with Eswatini, and the Commission members strongly spoke against the conflict in Eswatini, and said that the African National Congress must be very firm about ensuring that democracy must be developed and people must be allowed to freely express themselves in Eswatini, and we must go beyond just saying that SADC is going to be engaging. We must engage with those progressive organizations in Eswatini in particular who want to see change. We further spoke about solidarity towards Cuba and lifting of the embargo. I think I've already done that. On Pillar 3, party-to-party and multilaterals, we said we must rebuild international solidarity networks through party-to-party relations and building new relations with newly formed progressive forces. One of the issues that was also raised very strongly with regard to the transformation of global institutions was with regard to Ezuluni consensus, and that it remains our position, but unfortunately we see that it does not enjoy support outside of Africa, even among our closest strategic partners, and therefore this necessitates a review of the position, even though there is a reluctance to do so in the African continent. And then on the issue of the alliance partners, it was agreed that at all times when the alliance takes decisions that are related to international relations, we must make sure that we are in sync with each other as alliance partners, so that when we have to do solidarity work, we must speak with one voice. On the young people, this was a very strong discussion around the issue of young people and bringing young people into economic diplomacy and political diplomacy, and that these young people of South Africa, beyond the African National Congress, they must be assisted in understanding the current challenges of the world, and in particular the work that we do in solidarity, so that they can be able to connect to other young people. With regard to issues of I think that's about all, Comrade. Wait. Yeah, I think that's about all, because as you are aware, we still have to go and present to the plenary. We're still trying to put our document together so that by the time we present to the plenary, our documents are all in order. That's just what we can cover for now. Oh, no, there's one last thing that I think I must deal with, is with regard to the issue of gender equality. and women empowerment in relation to international relations, and the fact that we must be able to use all available vehicles in terms of diplomacy and make sure that the voice of women is heard, number one, make sure that women are properly deployed in all these institutional organizations where there's opportunities for South Africa, but also even in terms of the deployment of our ambassadors, diplomats. We must make sure that there is there is a focus on ensuring that women find themselves in those decision-making structures. Thank you.
No, we can now invite Comrade Pomolo. Thanks, Lindy, for the highlights. You can note your questions. We'll invite Comrade Pomolo for legislature and governance, and then we'll open for one round of questions.
Thank you very much, and greetings as well. It's chilly a bit here.
I thought I was making you a bit warmer. Huh?
No, thank you very much. I will make not so much the detail, but just the highlights of the deliberations in the commission, a very lively commission. As you may know, our preoccupation really is the capacity of the state to serve better. That is what predominantly we were focusing on, looking at how we strengthen the political institutions across all the spheres of government, looking at how we could make them effective instruments to contribute towards economic activity in their areas, looking at integrated planning, service delivery systems, as well as the corps, this public service corps at all levels that are to take forward the key tasks to ensure that we meet the aspirations of the people. We've looked at the role of Parliament, increasingly at all levels, of course, not just the national Parliament, provincial legislatures, even the roles in councils that are embedded, constituting both the oversight functions but also the executive functions. We've looked at all those, particularly against some of the findings in the public domain. We very much aware of the report of the Commission that has pointed to some criticisms in respect of how effective accountability is. We've looked into that. Of course, all of us reside in a local government sphere. No one exists provincially or nationally. The Commission spent a lot of time looking at how to make local government work better. The starting point was looking at the foundational prescripts that gave birth to the current layout of local government as we have. The 1998 white paper on local government. There's a strong suggestion that with 20 years of democratic local government, the objectives as were stated in that white paper in 1998 have to be looked at against the practice over 20 years of the implementation. There is a sense that there are very strong lessons that have been made out of that, lessons that would require that we place on the national discourse the need to review, in a sense, the viability of all the local government platforms as we have. We have sought through demarcation at different intervals to amalgamate some of the struggling municipalities to better optional municipal entities. We've also looked at the issue of a long outstanding discussion which we've had in terms of the two-tier system in local government. There's a strong suggestion that time is now that a move is made in that respect, where we look at the allocation of responsibilities. There does appear to be inordinate amount of delays that are experienced in the nature of the bureaucracy at the local sphere of government between districts as well as category B municipalities. We had long resolved on the matter. It is considered that it is time that we move with speed in that, so that the capacity issues, the capacity challenges that reside, and owing also to the dispensation in terms of the Systems Act, the categorization of municipalities, some of them are just unable to attract the kind of skills that are necessary to ensure some of the services are delivered very smoothly. So in that area, the Commission was strongly proposing that we make a move in terms of the consolidation, but of course that should go with the necessary consultation and engagement of all. Regarding the issue of resourcing of local government, it continues to be a concern. Again, at the time of the construction of the current layout, there was this greater emphasis on these entities being able to self-fund, in that they were expected to be entities that can generate themselves revenue. The result is that in the allocation of the nationally raised revenues, only 9%, thereabout, less than 10% is allocated to local government, and about 45% of allocated obligations reside with local authorities. So the issue of resourcing of local authorities is becoming paramount. The result is we need then to move with speed. We've resolved on the matter. Treasury, National Cocta have been engaged on the matter, but the progress has not been as expediting the matter. The Commission was of the mind that with better time frames, there has got to be movement on that. But together, it must be looked at with the distribution of functions between the spheres of government. Regarding the issue of accountability, we have looked at both accountability within the formal institutions within governance, but also setting up institutions inside the ANC itself. We have had before a local government forum that helped in the monitoring of implementation, particularly of resolutions. We have resolved, or the recommendation is strong, that such institutional capacity must be established within the ANC. Of course, the President has made a lead on the matter in the form of the quarterly local government barometer. We're saying that exercise must be enhanced with more areas of activity being looked at, including accountability, holding those who are in office accountable for the activities expected on them. That applies to Parliament as well, that there must be greater focus on holding the executive accountable, starting with all the offices. The Commission is making a recommendation of the establishment of a committee to oversee the presidency. The Commission was of the mind that it would not be averse to such a recommendation, but of course the President, we do know, in time there will be a comprehensive response given to the rest of the recommendations of the Commission. But in provinces, even in the local sphere of government, there is oversight mechanisms that are in place to oversee those offices. We think that it ought to be welcome and strengthened in terms of ensuring that there is necessary oversight within that office. Regarding electoral systems, the move towards integration of constituencies within the electoral system is fairly supported and appreciated. To that extent, even the process that is underway in Parliament to conclude the question of ensuring that there are it is provided for the participation beyond just political parties, even independents. That process has been appreciated. Of course, yes, in respect of the functions, the split of functions between the national sphere of government, government departments, there is a strong sense that there must be greater regional presence so as to have some of the functions driven from national departments being able to find interface with the provincial spheres of government along the district development model. It is something that fairly has enjoyed support. The other cross-cutting matters had to do with the mainstreaming of gender within the not just local government but across all spheres of government. There is a sense that in the last round of election where we had earlier made progress in respect of women representation, particularly in the local sphere of government, we have, owing to the systems we've put in place, unfairly or unfortunately, suffered reversals, which we will require that we revisit these measures we were taking. For instance, if one can make an example, because we wanted the communities to choose for themselves the representatives they would wish to have. The result is that in most of the places we have men than women being elected as councillors. The result is that where we had moved, there has been, owing to that, some reversals, a matter we think it requires to be reviewed. The demarcation issues of our municipalities, we think that the resolution we had taken to ensure that there is allowed time for these to mature. This constant changing of boundaries does lead to discomfort and sometimes disruption to service provision. These are matters that should be looked at differently. Lastly, with respect to traditional council areas, we have traditional authorities, traditional leaders. It's really been put across that we have to make sure that there is uniformity in the dispensation covering traditional leaders or traditional leadership, traditional leaders matters from across provinces. There's got to be greater coherence, consistency in the application, be it of means to do work, service benefits, etc. It is something that the Commission felt that it needs to be standardized. Of course, there are other matters to do with ward committees to try and secure a better relationship with sectors in the local area. These are matters that we have. Overall, there are matters that require urgent action in respect of some of the challenges that afflict some of our communities, challenges to do with water, challenges to do with escalating levels of crime, etc. the Commission has made some recommendations in those regards. That is summarily, without going in word for word. That's what we are going to be presenting at the plenary. Thank you.
No, thanks, Comrade Pumulo. We are now going to open the floor.